Evening. I'd like to welcome you all here to this HOD sponsored evening where we have a very, very good speaker. Both Michael and I have heard Mr. Belman talk before and we were most impressed, and we felt that it would be a good idea to bring him to Raanana so he could expand his ideas on the Palestinian problem with a larger amount of people. I'm just sorry that the attendance is so bad tonight, but I'm sure what Mr. Belman has to say will go down very well. And I have pleasure in asking Mr. Belman to talk after Mr. Les Glassman has introduced him, because I don't know much about Mr. Belman, but Les knows.
Wow.
Mr. Belman will.
Sure.
Can I ask you to tell us a bit about Mr. Belman and what he does?
It might be easier if I tell you about myself then, because I don't think anybody really knows. I come from Canada, where I have a law degree and an engineering degree, and I made Aliyah in 2009. Best decision I ever made. And I've been living in Jerusalem since I arrived. And I run a blog called Isra Pundit. And Isra Pundit I started 15 years ago, long time. Lots have happened since, and we've managed to establish our place in the firmament. We have a good following, particularly in the States. Everybody who really wants to know about the conflict in Israel, they sign up for my daily digest and follow my blog, and are quite happy to get it. So enough said on that.
No, can I just say, I'll just say one or two quick
Sure.
words, because it's quite big. No, I have to, okay. Wow. It's an honor and a privilege to have you here this evening, Ted. I just must mention to our viewers and the audience here that Ted organized the talk in Jerusalem at the Begin Center. And it was exceptionally well attended. We had amazing guests. I really recommend you all to see it. It's already on Ted's website, and it's going to be going on YouTube. And it was really exceptionally well not only attended, but the caliber of the speakers were amazing. They really were. And we had Muslim speakers, Jewish speakers, you had from all different spectrum speaking, and it was open to the floor, and it was just a very, very successful event. And those who look at your blog and what you do, you really are in awe, because you do tremendous work for our country, for Israel. And we recommend you all to look at the blog and to support in every way you can, because as you're going to hear tonight, we have a very special guest, and I want to thank Michael Bloch as well, and David for inviting us to come from Jerusalem. It's a privilege to be here with you and to be at this event. So thank you very much, all of you who've attended, and all of you are going to be watching this.
Thank you.
I would just like to mention that we really appreciate that as is known in our organization, Worthy Brother Les, that he took the trouble to bring Mr. Belman to us. And
Well, it's such a pleasure.
Really a wonderful gesture on your part as well.
No, it's a
For
great
which we
pleasure.
thank you.
Okay, Ted.
Okay. I'm going to forget about my notes. I'm going to reconstruct the whole thing, and I'm going to start with a solution to the problem. And there are many solutions that are out there. Everybody has a solution or a plan. Carolyn Glick has her solution where she wants to annex all the land and have a path to citizenship. Martin Sherman or Bennett has a solution where he wants to annex Area C only, and we'll worry about the rest later. And he hasn't commented on, he wants to give citizenship too. Feiglin has a plan. Everybody's got a plan. But my plan is a plan of action. everybody else's plan, if you say, when do you think your plan will be implemented? I mean, you get a blank face. Nobody has a date. Will it be 5 years? Will it be 10 years? How long will it take to get? So it's just a talking point. It's a plan. We have a plan of action. And it's our intention to have our plan become reality next year. And I will explain what the plan is and how it'll become reality. Now, aside from the people in Israel who have a plan, there are a number of people who believe in Jordan as the solution. And any right-thinking person knows that Jordan is fundamental to the solution because Jordan has so much land and they don't have the population to fill it. And Jordan used to be part of the Balfour Mandate. The Palestinian Mandate, Jordan was part of it. And when Balfour passed the declaration, Jordan was included in land promised to Israel. And I'll come back to that. Now here's the essence of our plan. We have been arguing in the lead up to this conference that we had, we've been arguing for that the king has to abdicate. This is the key to our plan. The king has to abdicate, and we have a man who's ready to replace him. And that man is Mudar Zahran. And I'll tell you a little bit about Mudar Zahran because he's the key to this plan. Mudar came from a wealthy family, lived in Palestine for a bit, lived in Jordan, ultimately moved to America, and he got a master's degree in America. Then he came back to Jordan, and he ended up in the American embassy as part of the intelligence capability of the American embassy. And in that position, he got to know the whole intelligence community throughout the Arab world, throughout Israel, throughout America, extremely well connected in that regard. But he was also very outspoken. So he would always speak out against the king. And that's a very serious offense in Jordan. And he didn't just do it once, he did it a number of times, as a result of which Jordan charged him with treason. And he had to flee the country, and he applied to Britain for asylum, and he was granted asylum, which was not an easy thing to get at the time. That was about 10 years ago. He went to Britain with asylum, and because the king was out to get him, they gave him a safe house so that nobody would know where he lives, and he's married and he has 3 kids, and he ended up living on welfare. But he continued to fight the king with articles. He's a journalist and whatever. Different people published him. And while he was in England, and he's been there for 10 years, he got a PhD. And he said, well, it doesn't cost a lot of money, and welfare is pretty good. I mean, Britain takes care of its own kind of thing. So he's got a PhD in the time that he was there, and now he's working on a second PhD. So a very ambitious guy. And throughout this whole time, he's been trying to organize an insurrection in Jordan, working with the Palestinians, because he's a Palestinian. And if you weren't aware of it, at least 75% of the people living in Jordan are Palestinians. At least 75%. And in a way, what the hell is King Abdullah, the Hashemites, doing in Jordan? They only have 82 members in their family. That's the extent of the people living that are in the immediate family, and they are running Jordan. And so he started to organize the Palestinians to rise up and to go to the streets and whatever. And they started that during the time that Obama was in office. And Obama, because of his peculiar policies of embracing the Muslim Brotherhood, which has their headquarters in Jordan, Obama did not want the king to be overthrown, and so the insurrection didn't go anywhere, and Mudar was biding his time. Now, I met him about 8 years ago. He was in Israel, and we got along very well. And he would keep in touch with me regularly, telling me about how he's organizing all the Palestinian camps in Jordan, like the refugee camps. Each camp had their own leader and whatever. And he was talking to them, trying to get them to form a coalition, an Arab coalition, opposition coalition, a Jordan opposition coalition. And he was producing a platform. So if people are going to join a coalition, they will know what the platform says and whatever. And he had to draft the platform, which he was working on, and he wanted my input on the platform. So he sent me the platform, and I had my own interest and goal. I wanted to make sure that the Jordan would be friendly to Israel, and I wanted to make sure that Jordan would welcome back to Israel all the Palestinians that they had given citizenship to. And I'll mention that in a moment. And that's all I wanted from him. And so he, on the other hand, first of all, he wanted to please me and to give me what I thought wanted, because he wanted Israel on their side. And in a way, I was a proxy for Israel, explaining what Israel would interest them and make them support him. And on the other hand, he had to go to all these Palestinians, refugees in Jordan, and like he readily admits, they hate the Jews. They hate Israel. But there's only one person they hate more, and that's the king. Right? So that's like the Palestinians, they hate Israel, but they hate the PA even more. But anyways, he had to work his magic with all these various groups to get them to accept the constitution or the platform that he was creating, because they were going to be a panel or a coalition that was based on that. And that program, it's a 15-page program, is posted now on my website, and his vision is a democratic, secular state, fully westernized. That's the vision. And then I remember, we did this about 3-4 years ago. He called me up one day very excited, because we used to have the idea or the belief that the king, his support, his strength is the Bedouin. That the Bedouin are treated nicely by the king, and this is what every dictator does. You take care of your friends. You let them eat at the trough, so they can get some of the ill-gotten gains. And you give them higher wages, you give them this, you give them whatever, in order to keep them loyal to you. That's what all dictators do. You have to have a constituency that has a vested interest in protecting you, because they're eating at the trough. And we used to think that was the Bedouin. So what happened is the king started to get into economic trouble, so he started to squeeze the Bedouin. And so 2-3 years ago, Mudar calls me up, and he says that there's a 1 million man Bedouin clan in Jordan wants to join the coalition. 1 million man. That's big. That's very big. And as it turned out, one of the Arab speakers that I brought to Jerusalem to talk from their point of view was a leader of that Bedouin clan. And he is also run away from Jordan because there's a price on his head. Anybody who wants to challenge the king has a price on their head. And so Mudar happened to bring even the Bedouin into his coalition, and we published a document 2 years ago. Now and it stays there, nothing has changed. But we decided that now's not the time, given that Obama's in office, and we sort of backed off the idea of overthrowing the government. But that was always his plan. Now, during this period of time, the Jordan tried Mudar for treason in absentia and convicted him to life imprisonment. This is serious stuff. And even now, when I was getting ready for the conference, he phoned me up agitated one day and he said his safe house has been made public and he has to go to the police immediately and get a new safe house. He's constantly on the run. And they gave him a new safe house and he's got 3 kids to worry about. Okay? So he's really dedicated to this whole idea. And the essence of the plan is that the king has to abdicate and he wants to replace the king, and then he's going to make Jordan as friendly to Israel as Emir Faisal wanted to make it 100 years ago when he made a deal with Weitzman, the Faisal-Weitzman agreement. You may be familiar with that agreement. And that agreement basically said is, we will welcome you here with open arms, and all we want from you is to help build our economy. And that's exactly what Mudar wants to do. He wants to be totally friendly and work with Israel in every way possible to build the economy. And that's what his plan is. And it all depends on getting rid of the king. That's the only thing. So when I'll come back to the current history, and I just wanted to give you a little bit of history starting with the Faisal-Weitzman agreement. That was 1919, that agreement. It never got accepted by Britain. It never got accepted by other Arabs. So he didn't represent everybody. He was a king of Syria at the time, a very important emir. And he really saw the Jews as somebody who could help the Arabs get out of their poverty, get over whatever that was before the age of oil. And he welcomed them there because of what they were going to do for Jordan. Okay? So that plan didn't go anywhere. And the next thing that happened that was of interest is that Churchill was appointed the minister of overseas whatever. He became a minister in charge.
Secretary.
What?
Foreign Secretary.
I don't think it was called Foreign Secretary. I have it here, but the exact name doesn't matter. And he was only in office starting in 1921, and his government lost office in 1922. Very, very short period. But while he was in office, he brought in what is known as the Churchill White Paper. And the Churchill White Paper was very interesting in that what he did in the Churchill White Paper was to do 2 things. He redefined, this is Churchill, and the paper was June 3rd, 1922. He redefined the Jewish national home to be only, as stipulated in the Balfour Declaration, to be only a cultural and spiritual center rather than a state. That's what the Churchill White Paper provided for. And that's become a big issue. People say, well, Balfour gave us the right for a national home, but what's that? Is that equal to a state? And that became a big political issue. And Churchill says, you're only entitled to a spiritual center. And that's something that Weizmann was even going along with, but he didn't win the day because others wanted a state and nothing less. So in any event, the second thing he said in the white paper was that called for the limitation of Jewish immigration to, quote, the economic capacity of the country to absorb new arrivals. That made it possible for Britain to tighten the screws, turn off the tap, slow down the immigration, and say the economic capacity isn't there to accommodate more Jews. Blame it on Churchill. But the white paper said one more thing of value to us, and it said, this is a very famous quote, that the Jewish community in Palestine should be able to increase its numbers by immigration as of right and not as of sufferance, which means you have the right to do this, you don't need our permission. Sufferance means we're letting you do it. And that paper said we have the right to do it. Something to keep in mind.
Ted,
Yeah.
did all this happen in a world that was still accepting Britain, telling people what they could do or couldn't do? I mean,
Well,
I thought that they after,
Britain-
after the war they had their power was eclipsed.
Well, certainly after the Second World War. But after the First World War, it wasn't so harmful to them. They still had their empire and their commonwealth, and they were much stronger than what they were after the Second World War, which was a more brutal war and whatever. And at that time, they still had their Indian empire, whatever. They were very strong. There's no question about that. And so strong that although they had the Balfour Declaration, which promised us all kinds of wonderful stuff, they were the first to violate it, such as with this white paper, and they wouldn't let the Jews come there. And in every way possible, they tried to limit the effect of the Balfour Declaration. Yeah.
The third point of the Churchill White Paper
Yeah,
is
speak louder.
contradicting the second point, because the second point says that the Jews are not allowed to have it.
Well, subject to the economic capacity.
Yeah.
Yeah,
But the
it
third
might
point
appear.
says they can do what they want.
I'm just telling you what it said. The rest of it you can argue, right? So, anyways, Britain from the beginning, although the Lloyd George and the various people in the government who backed in the cabinet, they were Christian Zionists, and some of you may be familiar with the famous book Daniel Deronda by George Eliot, which was written, I don't know, 40, 50 years earlier. She was also a Christian Zionist, and she had 100 pages in her book, Daniel Deronda. He was a Jew, expressing, it was total Zionism, what the Zionist ideal was. This was, so the Christian Zionists of Britain were very, very strong in the late 19th century, and that gave rise to the Balfour Declaration. The Balfour Declaration is interesting from one other point of view I should share with you, and I think this will interest you too, is that how did Weizmann convince Britain to do this, to set aside Palestine for the Jews? And it wasn't charity, and it wasn't Jews were entitled. What the debate was, they thought if Britain did something nice for the Jews, then the Jews in America would bring America into the war on Britain's side, and the Jews in Russia would keep Russia in the war. So the motivation to begin with was to get allies in Russia and Britain, and America, to join the British effort in defeating Germany.
Ted, can I just mention also Weizmann, he discovered acetone, which helped.
Well, that put him in close, but
Okay.
he
And
didn't get
also-
Israel.
also-
He didn't get Israel because he
Okay, but also
discovered.
he had a very close connection with Jan Smuts, and we had a South African event. And
That
Jan
made him
Smuts
friends. That made him
He had a
friends.
very close connection
But
with.
this is
the-
politics, and that was what motivated. Now, the other thing that motivated Britain, they loved the idea of a mandate because they were in an era, talking about your question, where they couldn't be imperialists anymore. Imperialism was sort of on the way out. They couldn't claim the land for their own or whatever. But let's dream up this mandate where we're in charge. We're running the mandate on behalf of somebody else, but we're there. And why do they want to be there? Because they wanted to look after the Suez Canal, particularly. Oil wasn't there yet. So the mandate served their purposes, okay? Now, and they, from then on, they screwed us. They prevented the immigration and did all of Clinton. So then Churchill wasn't finished. Churchill, in order to solve a political problem, and this you know about, Churchill decided to sever Jordan temporarily from the mandate It was still under the British mandate, didn't create a separate mandate. It was still the same mandate. And Churchill decides that he's going to give Jordan, temporarily, whatever that meant, to Abdullah, which is a great-grandfather, I think, of the current Abdullah, and in order to pacify him. It was 78% of the mandate that was given, and also and he went to Weizmann, and Weizmann was really upset because they needed Jordan for lots of reasons. The Jordanian land, there was arable land, there was a lot of reasons that they wanted it, and they needed it, because at that time they were looking at 12 million Jews in Europe that they were going to try, they hadn't been decimated yet, and they needed land. He didn't want to give it up. So what Churchill said, I am putting in this clause in the mandate, which says that the Zionist provisions in the mandate don't apply to Jordan, which means you can't settle in Jordan. And so Weizmann got all upset about that, and Churchill said it's only temporary, and if you don't sign the mandate, or I agree to that, we won't sign the mandate. And it was black
the
and
same
white.
year, I think.
Yeah. Churchill got Weizmann to agree to that clause and the removal of Jordan at the threat of canceling the mandate, because it hadn't been signed yet. And it was only about 2 or 3 months after this white paper that the mandate was signed, and I think even before it was signed, that Churchill was out of office. So that's the damage that our friend Churchill did. Now, one other thing that I want to mention, this is a side issue. Faisal, who wanted the Faisal agreement, Faisal said that, and of course, Muslims will be responsible for Muslim holy sites, and the Jews will be responsible for the Jewish sites, which seemed evidently reasonable. But when and so currently that's what has happened. This has been enshrined in law. But what's interesting is the Al-Aqsa Mosque, and you know how the Arabs are always saying, oh, they're trying to destroy the mosque, they're a danger to the mosque and whatever, and they create an intifada on the basis that we are attacking the Al-Aqsa Mosque. They never say they're invading the Temple Mount. The Temple Mount is not the mosque. They should have the mosque with a perimeter, and the whole mount should be an Israel holy place. Now, because of the lax Israeli government, they allowed that line to be blurred and allowed the Muslims to expand and say all of the Temple Mount is ours. But they would never have an intifada based on, oh, they're infringing the Temple Mount, because that's not the holy place. They need the holy place, and they say it's Al-Aqsa Mosque. So that's just a side point. So Jordan, by the way, declared itself, I don't want to give too much history because we're going to get into the other things, but some of these things I thought would interest you. Jordan declared itself independent in 1946. Then you have the War of Independence in 48, ceasefire in 49, and Jordan ends up in occupation of the West Bank and Jerusalem. And then they destroyed all the Jewish settlements and holy places and cemeteries and whatever. And only 2 countries in the world recognized the annexation by Jordan of the West Bank. That was Britain and Pakistan. Only 2 countries recognized it. And also, he annexed the land, which made the West Bank, I think, as populated as Jordan was. And so you have your East Bank and your West Bank, and everybody became a citizen in the West Bank who lived there, and that citizenship entitled them to vote. And they had a lower house that had half the members from the lower house in Parliament were from the West Bank, and the other half were from the East Bank. That's how it was one country run. So the takeaway from that is all the Palestinians in Judea and Samaria have Jordanian citizenship. Because in international law, you can't take away the citizenship. Once you can't leave somebody without citizenship and cancel their citizenship, so Jordan couldn't retract it. So all the children of the children of the children of those people have Jordanian citizenship. Now what's interesting about that, when Israelis talk about annexing the land, there's such a worry, oh, we'll have to give citizenship, and the world will, it'll be apartheid. No, they already have citizenship in Jordan, which changes it. It's not like they're without citizenship. So that's that part. Now,
Sorry, I have a question. Didn't Hussein cancel that
well,
citizenship?
that's later. We're coming to that.
Ah,
We'll get to that. He tried on a few occasions, but he was prevented. But anyways, so in the 70s, and then came the 67 war, and Israel turned the tables and recaptured the land, and they had Resolution 242, which basically said that Israel can. This is interesting too. The Security Council passed a resolution saying that Israel can remain in occupation of the land until they have secure and recognized borders, which means that they have the hechsher from the Security Council to stay there. It's not an occupation. That's the wording of 242. They can stay there until they have an agreement for secure and recognized borders, which they haven't had. And when they do, they don't have, those borders don't have to be on 67. They don't have to give up all the land. That argument you know about already. And the agreement had to be between the states in the area to the conflict. That's Jordan, Egypt, Saudi Arabia, whatever. And the PLO and the Palestinians weren't even heard from, had no right to negotiate, were nobody. And for lots of reasons, the Arabs then, they passed legislation, if you're a refugee, no Arab country can allow you to give up the refugee status, and they can't give you citizenship, and they got to stay in refugee camps. That was legislation passed by the Arab League. So every Arab country will not allow the absorption of the refugees, so they remain refugees. And today, I think there's maybe 20,000 refugees, original refugees from that time. And the millions that everybody quotes are children of children of children. And in no other place, like in the regular refugee law, that the children are not refugees. They get citizenship where they were born or whatever, but a refugee is the person who fled. So that's that issue. So anyways, in 1988, after the Arab League passed legislation turning over everything to the PLO, so Jordan thought they don't have any choice to remain independent, and they decided to also relinquish their right to negotiate the West Bank, which was a right put down in 242, and they had absolutely no right to give that right away to somebody else. That's not something they have a right to do, but they did it, and Israel didn't object to it, and Israel compounded it with the Fakat Oslo Accords, as you know, and they really made a mess of that. So that's how Jordan pulled out, but Jordan can't take the citizenship back. That's important. All right. So that brings us up to Obama is there, and then what happens is that when the first glimmer of hope came in the summer of 2016, the Republicans had a convention prior to the election at the end of the year, and in that convention they unanimously passed a resolution calling for some kind of settlement of the conflict without any mention in the resolution of a two-state solution or of Palestine. Totally absent from it because they wanted to expand the possibilities without defining or favoring a solution. So, and Trump was very much involved, his people were very much involved in approving that wording. No reference to Palestine, no reference to the two-state solution, and what is interesting, it was passed unanimously in the Republican convention. Huge, especially when you look at the Democrats and what they're doing and how anti-Semitic and anti-Israel a large part of the Democratic Party is. The party which, by the way, 75% of the Jews vote for. Another story. We won't talk about that this time around. But, and then when Trump got elected, both Mudar and I realized that that is an opportunity for us to make our plan heard. So we created the conference on the Jordan option, exploring all the issues and getting a lot of publicity and whatever, but at the same time, we were making inroads to the Trump administration and presenting them with the ideas. And they started following us, all quietly. And they even interviewed Mudar Zahran and vetted him. But he had already been vetted because he worked in the American embassy for 10 years. And they vetted him again. And when a government is looking at you, they don't look like person to person. They get some proxy to go check you out for them who isn't connected with the government. So the proxy is interesting that they sent to meet with Mudar. The proxy, you'll recall that this is the first time a rabbi gave the prayers at the inauguration. Mm-hmm. He was the head rabbi of Wiesenthal Center. Higher. The second in command, Cooper, was the emissary, and Cooper came to talk to Mudar and spent a couple hours with him, and then reported back. So Mudar has been vetted. Now, Mudar knows everything that's going on because he talks to intelligence people. Everybody tells him up-to-date stuff, what's going on. And they tell him that America is formulating plans that hinge on putting him in office. Very confidential. But they said to him, how do you think we should do it? And he wrote a 15-page paper for them. And in that paper he said, we want Israel to be against us. Nowhere should Israel in any way favor us. They should continue to say we want the king. Secondly, we want the American government to be against us, protecting the king. Because we don't want to appear as a puppet of Israel or of America. And right away, the Trump administration was very impressed with his sophistication. He understands psyops. He understands how you con the people, how you present the facts or the picture, the whatever, to make it more acceptable. And so at this moment, and things can change, that's the centerpiece to the plan. That's going to come down. Now, we don't know why that's good for Israel yet. I'm going to deal with that shortly. But first, I want to finish something about the plan. And these are, at the conference, certain very key questions were asked. One question was, how do you feel about separation of church and mosque? And he had no trouble with that. Right away he answered that they should be totally separated, in keeping with it being a secular state. And then I said, how do you feel about Jordan's role in the Temple Mount? He says, we have no business being in the Temple Mount, that Israel is sovereign, and Israel should appoint their own Muslims to manage the Waqf and Al-Aqsa Mosque. It has nothing to do with us. Another brilliant answer that he put forward. So then the next question was, will Saudi Arabia support you? Now, what's happened in Saudi Arabia is absolutely unbelievable. And I just written an article, I'm going to publish it maybe by Sunday. But Saudi Arabia, due to, if those of you who follow the American elections, Trump always said we have to defeat ISIS and their ideology. He always said defeat the ideology that gives rise to all these people. And in the time that he was in office, he managed to get Saudi Arabia to agree. And so by the time he came to Riyadh, it had all been agreed upon. Saudi Arabia had 50 Muslim countries in attendance, and Trump gave his speech about the ending the ideology and westernizing and coming into the modern world and all kinds of stuff like that I've identified in my article. And this guy, Mohammed bin Salman, bought into it 100%. And they are now committed to undermining Wahhabism. And they're committed to becoming westernized. And part of that commitment, and this comes back to King Faisal, or Faisal, or the Emir Faisal from 100 years ago, is that they came out with a plan they called Vision 2030. And that was an economic vision where they want to totally modernize, create industry, create universities, whatever they need to come into the modern world. And they recognize that to come into the modern world, they have to be hospitable to the West. They cannot have kafirs and Muslim law and Islamic this. They have to totally get rid of it. So the first thing, and so they got all the Muslim countries to agree to this. Unbelievable. This is the most important things Trump has done so far. Unbelievable. The conversion and the commitment. And part of the reason that's pushing that conversion and commitment is that Saudi Arabia is going bankrupt in 5 years. Saudi Arabia now has $750 billion surplus. But with today's price of oil, that surplus will run out in less than 5 years. And the price of oil is as low as it is today because the oil consumption in China has gone way down, and other countries, China is one of the biggest, obviously, and it's dropped dramatically in China. And America and Canada, with fracking, have increased production. So oil is not going to go up in price. It may even go down in price to $10 a barrel where it was in the '67 war, all the way down again. So the age of the Arabs being rich is over. They cannot afford to survive on $30 oil. So they know to avoid bankruptcy, they have no choice but to do what Faisal did and said, all we want you to do is help us with our economy. They're desperate for that. Not only are they desperate for that, they're desperate for Israel to lead the fight against Iran. So when Saudi Arabia talks about how strong they are and what they're going to do, and Israel better do, forget about it. They are desperately in need of Israel. Egypt too. Egypt desperately needs American money or Saudi money to carry on because they don't have the economy either. 2 years ago, Sisi made a speech about westernizing Islam. And I quoted that speech in my article. And they need money from America, and they need money from Saudi Arabia, and they need Israel's help to defeat ISIS in the Sinai and in Libya. Okay? So this is what's happening. That the same way Mudar wants to embrace Israel and have Israel help with their economy, it's no different with Saudi Arabia and Egypt.
So how do you square the fact that if this is true, that they need Israel, the people running the government, at the same time, they want it to appear to their populace that they hate Israel, and Israel is
But bit by bit, they're coming different. Amans are coming out with the olive branch, bit by bit, you're seeing things happening. Now, one of the things that they did was that they ostracized Qatar. Qatar is odd man out for the Arab states around the globe. They ostracized them, and I just reposted an article. Qatar is the worst funder of terrorism in the world and anti-Semitism. And Qatar embraces the Muslim Brotherhood. And you know who else embraces the Muslim Brotherhood? Jordan. So Qatar has to go, Jordan has to go. Because the headquarters of Muslim Brotherhood is in Jordan, and all the Arab states have to call the Muslim Brotherhood a terrorist organization now. And so they're out, and that's another reason why Jordan has to fall and the king has to go, because they want to destroy the Muslim Brotherhood. And that's why Qatar's on the out, and Qatar's also talking to Iran. And they have to get, there's all kinds of other reasons to get rid of Abdullah, but Abdullah is viewed upon as part of Qatar embracing the Muslim Brotherhood, which all the Arab states and United States want to get rid of the Muslim Brotherhood. And the Muslim Brotherhood happened to be the agent and proxy of Obama. He embraced them from day one, even before he was in office. He embraced the Muslim Brotherhood. That was his solution. Everything Trump administration is totally different. So that's what's happening in that part of the world. Now, we've developed a plan. How are we going to take advantage? Let's assume Mudar comes into office, and let's assume Mudar reaffirms the citizenship and invites all the Palestinians back to Jordan. What we have to do in Israel is to incentivize the Arabs in Judea and Samaria to go to Jordan, to emigrate to Jordan. Now, in terms of the idea of incentivizing emigration, Martin Sherman has been proposing that for almost a decade. Smotrich just announced aid to people to get them to leave. That's another guy. Feiglin is supporting compensating emigration. And Martin Sherman said, we've turned the corner. It is now very much on the table. Everybody's discussing the idea of paying the Arabs to leave. So I happen to get in touch with a guy who does feasibility studies, economic feasibility studies that are huge. What kind of studies? $100 million real estate projects. He does the economic feasibility. And when he saw I was proposing the construction of a 1 million man city in Jordan, he said, I've been studying the issue and I've got all the numbers. And so, working with him, he said, you know what it costs to build a regular apartment in Jordan? It cost $32,000 per apartment, including the land. In Israel, the land alone is $150,000. In Jordan, it's $32,000. So then we look over roughly 2 million population, Arab population in the West Bank and in Jerusalem. There's about 2 million, including Jerusalem. We think that we can induce them to leave if they get jobs. They have to build the city for 1 million people, all the homes that have to be built and whatever. And our plan was to give them free housing. And that means it's going to cost us, based on the number of families, and we figured out the number of families, it was going to be $12 billion for the whole kit and caboodle to build all these homes, plus another 10 billion for infrastructure. And the infrastructure was going to include a desalination plant that would double the water consumption they currently have. Double it from one plant would be included in the $22 billion that was going to be spent. And as I said at the conference, obviously if you're building a city, there's the jobs for all the Palestinians to go. They got to build a 1 million person city to build there. And Mudar is totally in favor of that. Let's do it, kind of thing, right? But we have a problem. How do you give free homes to all these people? And it'll cause a lot of resentment to the people already living in Jordan who don't get free homes. And you got to take into account that is a problem. So I came up with another answer. And the other answer has to be connected with something else. You all are familiar that Lieberman, with almost the support of Netanyahu, and it was pushed by America, was going to double the size of Qalqilia from 56,000 to 112,000 people. And there was such a hue and cry, the government backed off. And I, at the time, wrote, that is absolutely madness. We should be getting the residents of Qalqilia out of there, not doubling them. It was such a crazy idea. And the problem we have is that even Bennett's plan for annexing Area C has all these pockets of Area B. How do you have a state with 10 pockets of a different people who aren't citizens? How do you do that? And Bennett's never addressed that problem. Now, what's interesting, I thought, I have a better idea. Let's not offer the free homes to any Palestinian who will immigrate. Let's be selective. Let's offer the homes only to refugees. Now, of the 2 million Arabs in Judea and Samaria and Jerusalem, do you know that close to 900,000 are refugees? Say, how can there be refugees? They're living in the Palestinian Authority. Don't they vote? Don't they have... No! The general Arab program of nobody normalizes them even applies to the Palestinian Authority, and they don't normalize them, so they still have refugee status. Interesting, right? And where do those refugees live? In all these pockets of B and in Qalqilia and Talkarn. That's where they're living. So I said, I don't care about the Arabs living in Ramallah and Nablus. I care about all these pockets in our gut, in Qalqilia and all these areas. So let's focus on getting the refugees out. And so, and then I said, let's do something else. Let's put a mortgage for 50% of the value on the property. So they get a very small mortgage. It would be $16,000 mortgage. That's all the mortgage that they have to carry. And then we can build twice as many houses and give those houses to the refugees that are already living in Jordan. And they also have refugees. So that way, with the same investment, we can solve the problem of how do you give some people, not other people, to the refugees. Now, going further.
You only,
I'm sorry?
to interrupt, but you only talked about the refugees. What about all these other? What about the Bedouin in Jordan? What about the
You can
Jordanian
tweak it. I'm just
citizens
saying,
who are
all they're getting is residence with a mortgage. If need be, it can go to everybody. I won't get into. I'm just saying, the essence. I'm focused on the refugees. Now you go one step further. There is 1.6 million Arabs in Gaza. Anybody know how many refugees in Gaza?
All of them.
1.3 million. Almost the entire population of Gaza are refugees. So I say, let's include that 1.3 with the 800,000 in the West Bank, and you've got 2 million, and let's give them all free housing to go, and then if they go, we can annex Gaza and make Gaza part of Israel. Now here's another interesting factoid, is that as cheap as the housing is in Jordan, it is half price in Egypt. Egypt, it's $16,000 for an apartment. And Egypt has 96 million population, which is almost 15 times what Jordan has. So if you take 1.5 million refugees from Gaza and you put them into, it's only 1.3% of the total population, right? Now, Egypt, but Egypt is desperately in need of money, in need of our protection, and us to help destroy ISIS and whatever. So it just shows you how there are solutions, fabulous solutions, but nobody's talking about them. And we felt with Trump in office, Trump wants to do the ultimate deal. This is the ultimate deal. And another reason why it's the ultimate deal is because if we succeed with this, then that's the end of the PA and the end of UNRWA. Because all the Jordan will take over the schools for the refugees. There'll be no more need for UNRWA. This is so enormous. It appeals to anybody who wants a common sense, ultimate, total solution. And so that's why we've been focused on Trump, and we believe at the moment Trump is going to do it. Now, I just mentioned one other thing. Carolyn Glick has written a few articles, one recently, and she said that Trump is becoming a laughing stock, that was in the title, for the policies in the Middle East. And she made this point, don't you believe it? And then Yalon this week said that Trump doesn't have a strategic vision. He doesn't know what he's doing. The policies are all confused. Yalon has been out of office for 2 years. He knows nothing about this, about what's going on. And what is going on, and you'll see it happening, is America has a master plan for the whole Middle East. They haven't walked away. They're talking a peace agreement now. You know why they're talking the peace agreement now? Not because they think they're going to get an agreement at all. That's psyops again. It's going through the motions. It's creating magic. They don't mean it. It's a sleight of hand. What are they doing? They are now putting the pieces together that will enable Saudi Arabia in their courtship of Israel to come out of the closet. We're going to give Saudi Arabia fig leaf so they can more publicly get together with Israel. And that's what this is all about. It is preparing the way. There's going to be no peace agreement here. Forget about it. Don't worry about it. Ain't going to happen. And it's all about furthering the connection. And why? Another reason Jordan has to go, because there's going to be so much trade going from Israel to Saudi Arabia that we want trucking lines. We want a friendly Jordan, so trucks can be trucking in back and forth goods to Saudi Arabia and so on. So that's another reason Jordan is going. It's not going to be run by the king in a year from now. And he has plans for Kurdistan. Look what's happened in Lebanon. Lebanon is going to be destabilized soon. They started already. They're on notice. Trump has promised that he's going to push back Iran, and I believe he's going to do it in his time. And this is part of the thing. Oh, what's he doing? He has Iran just did this, they did that. Well, it's happening in a very orderly fashion. And the first thing, aside from the revolution in Saudi Arabia, something just happened. Qatar is a problem. What's the problem? America has their Air Force there and their Navy there. And they are running an enormous airfield out of Qatar to fight ISIS. And so America felt awkward when the Arab states were boycotting Qatar. Just this week, America announced they're enlarging the airfield in Jordan. And they're going to be moving the whole airfield to Jordan, and they're going to control Jordan as they do now. They didn't need Jordan's permission. They're just doing it because America is in control of the army and the Secret Service in Jordan, and the king is nothing. So America has a plan, and you'll start bit by bit. You'll see evidence of this plan coming to fruition. So let's leave that at my formal remarks, and anybody has some questions?
Is this all in your article?
Yeah,
It'll be great to see how much of it happens.
yeah, you pay attention. You'll see, well, the moving of the airport's been announced. That's happening. And
What's this?
what?
What about airport?
From
I didn't hear you.
Qatar to Jordan.
Oh, I see the
Yeah,
airport.
like the big air base that's in Qatar is being moved to Jordan to stabilize Jordan and have an American presence there. And if America is there, then they can, nobody can have an insurrection or do anything, because ISIS was going to move into Jordan. And there's intelligence on that. So, so that's, you can watch for this plan. There's a grand plan, it's going to happen, and you'll see Lebanon destabilized. They want Hezbollah to get out there, and it's all coming together.
Is your article going to appear in the press?
I'm sorry?
Is your article going to appear in the press?
It'll be published, yeah.
Good.
Not just, it'll be published, aside from on my blog, on the top American blog, American Thinker. It'll be published in Arut Sheva. It'll be published maybe in Times of Israel. And it'll be circulated to the White House and everybody that has to read it. Yeah, where I'm disclosing a lot that people don't know about. So the question is, why doesn't Carolyn Glick know about that? Because Carolyn Glick isn't connected to the intelligence community. This is all done on the QT and on the quiet and whatever. It's not something that people know. So that's the story.
Does anybody actually believe?
What?
Does anybody actually believe that there's going to be peace in the Middle East?
Well, I just told you where it's
Yeah, I
coming
know.
from.
I know.
Well, who would believe that Saudi Arabia, who backed Wahhabism, is now undermining Wahhabism? And you know what they did in Saudi Arabia to confirm it? The Wahhabists, they had religious police to enforce. And Saudi Arabia canceled the police force in this revolution. That's one of the things they did.
And they
destroyed the religious
arrested
police.
a
are
lot of
gone.
the
What?
They arrested a lot of princes, a lot of now in Saudi Arabia
corruption,
for
yeah.
corruption.
Right, when they arrested all. It's happening. There it is, more evidence.
Is it clever to release this plan in public? Wouldn't it be better to keep it quiet in a clandestine matter?
I'm the only one shooting off my mouth. Everybody else is quiet.
No, but if you publish it, everybody can read it. And
Who am I? Who pays attention to what I write?
well, you publish it.
No, I'm
you
just
publish it.
saying, I didn't quote any sources, so I don't have a lot of credibility. I'm just telling you that we have sources, we know what's going on.
But if you publish it, the enemy, so to speak, knows that plan and can.
What can they do?
Can
Well, but until it
prepare
happens,
themselves or whatever.
well, listen, Saudi Arabia invited Harari back to Saudi Arabia. I mean, they see the moves. They see the moves. I'll give you something else. We're also upset that America gave up Kirkuk. They didn't keep Kirkuk for the Kurds,
That's right.
right? So I can tell you the story about that too. Number one, Yash, this is QT. Number one, what happened? And the Kurds are very upset with this, but they needn't be. One of the things that America said was that it was premature, your referendum. And what they meant by that, in due course, we have an orderly progression of what we want to do. And first we want to do Jordan. And we'll get to you. But they said something else. When Jordan challenged, first of all, did you read anything about people getting killed? No. When they took over Kirkuk, it just melted away.
Forces
It
left.
melted away. And that was part of it. And they said that Iraq is taking it back because it's disputed territory. Now, if Kirkuk is disputed territory, that's like giving a hexure to the rest, the autonomous region, saying that's not disputed. And Iraq didn't go any further than Kirkuk. And if they were so weak, if the Kurds were so weak, there was nothing wrong to Iraq to destroy the whole autonomy. But they didn't. They stopped with Kirkuk. And Kirkuk, I believe, will end up going back to Kurdistan in due course.
No, but they took it because they want the oil.
Well, there's oil there, but oil isn't as important as it used to be, as I've
But to
indicated.
the Kurds, it's very important, and to the Iraqis.
Well, the Kurds have an economy, sure. And what I haven't mentioned, and I don't think we're going to mention in our article, but I'll tell you what it is. Did you see the article this week about Erdogan saying there's only one Islam and it isn't the moderate one? And that's what Islam is for now, tomorrow, in the future?
7th century.
Is that what?
7th century.
Yes, that's Erdogan says this. Guess where there's going to be another coup?
That I'd like to
In
see.
in Turkey.
But he controls everything there.
In Turkey.
Well, he's a dictator.
That's going to be another coup. In due course. America has a huge plan.
But they could put Abdullah in to take over.
They'll put the army back in. No, they'll put the army back in.
But the whole army has been arrested in Turkey.
You know how America goes to the army? They get the top generals who can do this and give them $1 million each, and they buy them, and that's how they control armies, by paying off the generals. They have their ways, but the army wants back into power. They don't want to become religious again, like under Erdogan. So, and Trump has another 7 years to go, right? Give him time. Give him time.
Hopefully.
So this is you know, I'm a bearer of glad tidings. This is good news stuff. Coming to Christmas, what the hell? We need good news, right? Hanukkah.
Okay. All right, sorry. First of all, thank you very much for your very elucidating talk. It is quite different in a way from what we heard at the conference, but in fact I would say it was even more interesting hearing you, because the Bedouin that spoke there, no one understood one word.
I didn't
what he
understand either.
said. He spoke with a very heavy accent that you couldn't
Right,
understand
right.
a word. But anyway, at least you elucidated a lot of things. I have a bit of a problem with the modalities. The concept I agree with 100%. I've agreed with this concept from the age of 14 when I started the Beitar in my town. But the modalities I find a little difficult. You see, King Hussein, the father of Abdullah, put down a revolution by the Palestinians, and he massacred 20,000 of them. It's not such an easy matter to get rid of a king.
It was Black September.
Very, very difficult. And his son Abdullah won't kill 20,000, he'll kill 60,000. And no one will say anything, and there won't be even a question.
The king controlled the army.
At the
No more.
well, that remains to be seen, because
Yeah.
he'll promise the Bedouin. Listen, you tell the Bedouin like Assad did in Syria. Listen, you guys, you better fight for me, as Assad said. Otherwise, these Sunni Muslims are going to massacre you. And we saw what happened. They won. And the same can happen in Jordan.
Yeah.
I mean, he'll promise them, he'll tell the Bedouin, you better be careful, because these Palestinians will massacre you. And he can pay them off. And they've got the guns, the army they've got the guns. I'll avoid what you suggest will happen.
Well, you're
But
building straw men. It's not going to happen that way. America controls the army. Start with that. And what they tell the army to do, the army will do. End of story.
So how come America wasn't involved in the so-called coup in Turkey? Was that a put-up job?
That's a confusion. I can't comment on that because I've heard it go both ways. That on the one hand, the coup was phony, gave an excuse there to want to arrest 30,000 people and put them in jail.
Yeah.
And others, because it's hard for me to believe that you do something like a coup that's so important and so dangerous
When
that
the
you don't do it
leaders out of
better.
the country.
That you don't do it better.
Yeah.
That blew me away, you right? And so I don't know if it was for real or not, and I don't know if America was involved or not. So I can't
They didn't
comment.
have the numbers.
What?
They didn't have the numbers. The people that wanted the coup, the army, Erdogan had support. He was elected democratically, by
Yeah.
the way.
Well, he
Well,
wasn't
it's the
supposed to
numbers.
come back. This was supposed to be done in his absence, when he's out of the country.
Yeah, he came back.
Anyways, it'll happen.
Just gonna take one more sugar nut to take a pot shot at Edwin and he's gone. Bye bye.
All I have to do is shoot him, right? Shoot the king. Oh, you mean Mudar?
No, I think he means the king.
Yeah, Mudar, obviously his life is in danger, like Sadat's life is in danger, right? This is the way it is. But that's been his life. And Mudar says, I'm not stupid, even although I have a platform of democracy, there's no such thing as democracy in the Middle East. You can't run a country with democracy and survive. He knows that. You know, this is all surface. He says, my clan, my family is 30,000. And I'm going to bring that 30,000 into the government. These are the people I can count on and rely on. They know how to do it. Plus, he says, the king is stealing so much money. We're going to raise everybody's welfare, everybody's pension, everybody's this. We're going to buy off the people. And we're going to have one law that we're going to give you all these goodies. But if you in any way challenge us, you're going to lose everything. So they hold them hostage to these entitlements. And anybody who steps up, they don't keep getting the entitlements if they challenge in some way that's unacceptable to the government. They lose it all. And that's the end of them. That's
Short, if you read the newspaper, read between the lines. Because there's a lot that we don't know what's going on.
we don't. I just told you what's
That's
going on.
right. What you've told us tonight
Yeah.
will never ever appear in a newspaper.
Bit by bit it will. Bit by bit it will.
There's just one thing that bothered me about Mudar. What's his name?
Zahran.
Zahran, is that when he spoke on the Skype, he said that the name of Jordan remains Jordan. I think the key to the whole thing is that Jordan must change his name to Palestine, the Hashemite kingdom
Interesting
of
point.
Palestine.
I don't
or-
think he'd
or
be
whatever.
adverse to that. I don't think he'd be adverse to that. I'm going to ask him that. I'm gonna
I
ask
mean,
him
that is
specifically.
key to the whole thing. That otherwise
What's
the
in the name?
Palestinians.
Ask the Romans. They wiped out Judea and Samaria, right? It has to become Palestine.
Yeah, that it has to be named Palestine.
I agree.
Otherwise, the Palestinian will say, "But we don't have a state. Our state is
No,
called
I think that's a
Palestine."
valid point. If you name it Palestine,
Then it's Palestine.
then it's
There's
Palestine.
no argument
Absolutely.
anymore.
I like that. I'm going to go back to Mudar and say this is what we do.
But Palestine was given by the Romans to Israel, so there's a problem here.
Yeah, yeah. Okay.
Thank you very much. Much obliged.
Thank you very
Les,
much
to
indeed. It
yourself,
was most informative.
most interesting.
Let's just hope it